everybody, this is Caitlin here, and welcome back to Card Game Wednesday, the day of the week where we enjoy all things card game related. And today I am bringing you a deck profile newly from after the advent of Demon King. This is one that I kind of brewed up because I was thinking about how I wanted to build a deck around my favourite card from Advent of the Demon King, Jeanne D'Arc, the Mad Maiden. Now, I made up with this deck. The main priority of this deck was actually to support Jeanne, but it ended up actually doing well in other areas that I wasn't even thinking of. So I ran this at my locals. It would be yesterday on the Tuesday, because Tuesday is our Force of Will day at my local Geek Retreat. I ran this in the tournament, and I did pretty well. I managed to come third with it. I got one loss, and technically it was kind of like, not two draws, but it went the way where it was like, out of a best of three, I won the first game, but the second game went to a draw, because they didn't resolve in time. So technically I got like a 1-0. But thankfully with the points and whatnot, it was able to get me a third place, which I was pretty chuffed about. Managed to get my promo and the extra packs and whatnot, so I thought I'd share this deck with you guys. I'm still wanting to maybe tweak it a little bit. I do have some ideas of how I want to change it and whatnot, but just as the build is, I wanted to show you guys. And if I do end up tweaking it, changing it a little, I'll maybe show you guys this deck again, depending on whether maybe if I manage to get first with it, I'll maybe update it for you guys, or maybe just put out a little Tumblr post or something like that, if you guys are still interested in that. So, what is this deck? Well, this deck, the idea of it is the theme of, I'm calling it her obedient servants. The main idea of it is to actually support Jeanne, mainly. So to do that, we have Fiethsing as our ruler. I won't really be going too in-depth over like most of the cards. Mainly, I'm only going to be talking about the ones that really matter. So the reason why we're running Fiethsing is because we're going to try and use her ability for her Torn, or essentially whenever you play your second card each turn, you can put a 100/100 Elf Resonator token into your field. That's the main reason why we are playing Fiethsing, because we want to get in lots of little tokens and whatnot in order to, by turn 2, if we get the right amount of stones, we will be able to play Jeanne. Turn 2, if we manage to get 2 elves into the field in our first turn, which is basically doable, even 3 elves potentially, but that is the main reason why we're doing that. I rarely ever flip her over to her jeweler side. She does cost 5 to do so when you Judgment, but I rarely flip Fiethsing. The only reason I have Fiethsing mainly is for the token generation, so I will only ever flip her if I feel like I need another body and I don't have the Resonators in hand, but usually I will not flip her until it's quite late game. I've maybe gotten practically all my stones out and I have no reason to tap for stones. That would be the only other reason why I would flip her. I suppose like you can get 2 elf tokens whenever you play your second card each turn when you flip her, but because she's such a high cost for flipping, that's the main reason why I don't flip her. So she mainly stays on her ruler side, very rarely ever flips. So that is the ruler for the deck. And to support this deck, first up we have 3 copies of the Spirit Color Elf. This is really a good play for turn 1. Doesn't matter if you have your Energize or not, this is essentially a really good turn 1, where you basically pay the 1 and she brings in another elf token with her, so basically you've got 2 elves for 1 will. It's also kind of good going off with Energize, because if you want, you can play 2 of these and you end up with at least 5 elves on your first turn, because you get these 2 elves, they each produce a token, and your second card produces another token. So by that point, your turn 1, you'd have 5 elves, which is pretty awesome. I mean, they're all 100/100 technically, but at the same time, it's like, if you manage to get something else that boosts up your elves, then they can get a little bit more defense and whatnot. So we're running 3 of these. I would like to make them 4, but it feels like it's running okay now with just the 3. I might get another 1 to try and boost up a little bit, so I might need to see about that. Next up, we have 3 copies of Little Red Riding Hood, or Red Riding Hood rather. She is the CFC Little Red, and you've seen her quite a few times. You saw her in my recent Fairy Tale deck for Million, so I won't go into too much about her effects and whatnot. You should basically know everything she does by now. 2 costs, 300, 400. She does loads of stuff basically. When she dies or when she goes into graveyard, we get to get a stone rested, which is really good for stone ramping. When we have 5 stones, she gets 400, 300. So she bumps to 7/7, and when we have 7 stones, she gets swiftness, first strike, and precision. And that's really the main thing that we're using this for is for a blocker, and mainly so that we can get a bit of stone ramping when she dies, because I was considering running Magic Stone Research, but because I believe it only affects basic stones, so that wouldn't really work out with our deck. So this is mainly the reason. So when it dies, we get a stone, and you know what, it's a pretty cheap Resonator for only 2 greens, considering that the majority of all of our stones are green, so we will 9 times out of 10 be able to play this card, no bother. Again, I was considering running this a 4 of. I'm not too sure whether I want 4 of Spirit Color Elf or 4 of the Little Red. Let me know what you guys think down below, which one you think should be a 4 of, but right now they're both at 3. What is definitely a 4 of is our girl, Jeanne. I managed to get my playset, sadly not a full art playset as I would have liked, but I managed to get a playset of Jeanne's. 2 of my good friends managed to trade me the other 2 that I needed for my playset. I'll show you off the lovely full art that we pulled from our box. If you've not seen the box opening video, guys, be sure to check into my channel. We did have an awesome box opening where we pulled this lovely card. But the deck is to support Jeanne herself. But what does Jeanne do? She is a lovely lady. She's 2 drop. She is 2 darkness. She's a 700/500 human. This card gains swiftness, and this card cannot be destroyed as long as you control 3 or more Resonators. Now, she includes herself in this because it doesn't say other. So that's the reason why running the elves and whatnot is really good, because even if we manage to at least get 2 elves in on our first turn, she will have swiftness on turn 2 if we get the 2 darkness stones or whatever that we need. So she counts herself, which this is really important as well. But under here it also says if this card would deal damage to a J/Resonator, put a minus 100/100 counter on that J/Resonator instead for each 100 damage, which is really, really good. So 9 times out of 10, your opponent doesn't want to block using their Resonators unless they're just going to outright die from what would be the damage. Half the time they want to make sure that their big Resonators keep their attack and whatnot. So 9 times out of 10, they'll let you swing with Jeanne. This is what happened in the majority of my games where I had Jeanne. My opponent would mostly take the damage. The only time that they would ever block the damage is if they were blocking with, say, something a little bit smaller that would definitely die no matter what. Like, say, if it was one of their big Resonators, they wouldn't block and, say, they wouldn't be able to kill Jeanne most of the time because I had 3 Resonators, so she couldn't be destroyed. But 9 times out of 10, they would not, block with their big Resonator. They would keep it up so they could attack again after I attacked. So that was really the way that she kind of snuck in there. She ended up not being, the total powerhouse of the deck, even though I designed this deck to be a total powerhouse. But otherwise, she is still an awesome card. I love her. She's the main kind of focus for this deck. I would call her the MVP, although some other cards did pull out some pretty awesome plays and whatnot. So ideally, it's for Jeanne to be the main honcho of this deck, but some other guys kind of snuck in and showed off how good they are as well. So for this deck, we have 4 copies of the lovely Jeanne. Next up, another really good card here that I think I'm going to make a 3 of, maybe, is Elven Exorcist, which is a 3-drop. It's 1 wind and 2 void. It's at 600/700. Whenever this card battles, oops, as I shake the camera there, my apologies. Whenever this card battles, it gains 400/300 until end of turn. So whenever it is battling a Resonator, it becomes a 1000/1000, which is pretty cool. So straight off the bat, if it's blocking or if it's doing battle with a Resonator, just against the Resonator though, not against the J/Resonator, so it doesn't work on J rulers. It becomes a 1000/1000, which is pretty awesome, considering that not a lot of the elves are quite beefy or bulky themselves. So having this as a 3-drop is actually pretty nice, and obviously buffing it up with any other spells that we had is also really awesome. So I might make this a 3 of, and maybe drop something else in return, but I really like this card, and we also got a full art of this card actually, so I might slip that one as well. One of the cards that was actually one of the really important cards of this deck that ended up happening, which I didn't actually foresee, was Faithful Vampire, which is a 3-drop that is 2 darkness and 1 void in 800/800. And I also have a lovely full art here that we managed to pull, but I'll move over to these ones so it's a little bit easier for me to read. Now, he has 3 abilities, which was a heated discussion at my locals, because obviously we were discussing about his abilities that stack. So obviously he has 3 abilities, all of them you pay darkness for. The first one is he gains flying until end of turn. The second one is this card gains, whenever this card deals damage, you gain that much life until end of turn. And you pay another one, this card gains, whenever this card deals damage to a Resonator, destroy that Resonator until end of turn. Now, the funny thing about this is I believe, and I'm pretty sure we did decide on this ruling, or this ruling was figured out. If it's maybe wrong and we've not done it properly, please shout out, guys, because obviously we were debating this and we were trying to find a ruling for it. But as far as our normal head rules guy, whatever, our quote-unquote judge, because we've not got an official judge, but we have a guy who is pretty much the judge of our area, the lovely Dom and whatnot. The second ability, or rather all the abilities technically, can be stackable. So for instance, the middle ability, which lets you gain life, you can pay this multiple times to gain several instances of life. It works similar in the way, I believe the way that was phrased is that Divine Base of Ataratica, whenever you inheritance, it has the thing where whenever you play an inheritance or whatever, it gains lifelink, and obviously you can do that multiple times because it doesn't state you can only do it once per turn. So You can do this multiple times. As far as I'm aware, if I'm wrong, guys, please be sure to comment, because sometimes I get confused with rulings. A lot of people can get confused with some rulings, but as far as I'm aware, you can pay this multiple times and gain different instances of life gain. So I could pay, like, say, 3 instances, I would get 3 times 800. It wouldn't change how much damage I'm doing, it would just change how much life I'm gaining back if I managed to deal that damage, which was pretty sane. With that working, we were figuring out that at one point I could get up to like 94 health, or rather 9,400 if you want to do it by that terms, but it was pretty insane, and he ended up being a pretty decent guy, because I managed to make sure that he didn't die, or if he did die, then I'd bring him back with a couple of cards, whatever that I had. But he was awesome. He ended up being a pretty decent powerhouse in our deck. So I'm definitely going to keep him as a 3-of. He seems decent as a 3-of. I would love to try and get full arts of him, but again, since he's an uncommon, it'll probably be a little bit hard to get full arts of him. But I would really like to try and do that. So he was actually really awesome, and I quite like him. And also his artwork is pretty cool. I'll probably maybe try and stick him in the thumbnail somewhere. Next up, we have 2 copies of Commander of the Crowd. I was debating whether to include either her or Oberon, but the main reason why I chose her over Oberon is because there's a card that we have in our deck, which I believe is it Command of Life and Death? Yeah, Command of Life and Death, which lets you bring back a 3-drop or less from your graveyard into the field, and I didn't want to run too many 4-drops. I preferred to keep them as 3-drops or less, so that's why I decided to pick her over Oberon. There's not really that much difference. Oberon has like 1 extra 100 of attack and defense, and he brings in another Resonator, or rather another token, so I felt like this would be better. And plus, whenever she attacks other elves that we control, gain plus 100 until end of turn. So since we're going to be having a lot of elf tokens in the field, I felt like she would be better. I think I might make her a 3-of. I might need to just wait and see. I want to make either her or the Elvish Exorcist, or is that what it's called? The Elvish Exorcist? Elven Exorcist, rather. My apologies. I might make them a 3-of. Just need to wait and see. I really do like her. She seems to be really cool, and she did like bring out some kind of clutch plays or whatever for me. Next up, we have 2 copies of the Elf in the Trees. I might cut this out because I didn't end up playing this card very often. More often than not, I would choose a lot of the cards over this one, and I ended up mulliganing this in my first hand a lot of times, so I might remove this and put in something a bit better. But what it does currently, it is a 3-drop, it's 1 green and 2 void, it's 0 attack but 800 defense. At your beginning of your main phase, you produce 1 will. I ended up not really having this. He mainly ended up being a chump blocker whenever I did manage to play him, and I never really got the effect off of his produce a green at the start of my main phase and whatnot, so he wasn't really that good. I might replace him with something, I'm not too sure what, but I'll need to think about it. Then lastly, for our Resonators, we have 1 copy here of our Bloodsucker Dragon, and I really only wanted to play 1 copy of him because I really liked him, and I really liked his artwork from pulling him at pre-release, and I just wanted to include him in the deck because I wanted some kind of flyer. He was pretty cool. He's a 6-drop, so he is kind of expensive, but hopefully if we get some stone ramping, then we can play him a little bit earlier. He's a 1000, he has flying, and whenever you deal damage, you gain that much life, so if he manages to swing with his attack and he's not stopped, he's dealing 1000 damage and gaining 1000 life, which is really, really nice. And I didn't want to run any more copies of it, mainly because too many copies and I may end up pulling it too often, and he is pretty expensive, so we won't be able to play him until late game, so that's why I only have 1 copy of him. But going into our spells now, guys, one of the really important ones we have here is Command of Life and Death, like I mentioned earlier. Is a 2-cost chant, it's 1 dark and 1 void. You put a target Resonator with total cost 3 or less from your graveyard into the field. So this can basically target the majority of our Resonators. We can get back our Jeannes, we can get back our Faithful Vampires, we can get back Little Reds if we need to, our Commander of the Crowds, our Elven Exorcist. Basically, it hits the majority of our deck. The only thing it doesn't hit is obviously Bloodsucker Dragon, so it's the only Resonator that doesn't get hit by this. But other than that, I feel like it's a pretty decent card. Running 3 of it, I feel like 3 is a decent number for getting stuff back from our grave, and it's a 2-cost, so I feel like 3 copies is enough of this. I don't think I really need to run more than that because I've been drawing it quite consistently. I'm running 1 copy. I might bump it to 2, potentially, but I'm running 1 copy of Ciel's Windblast, which is a 5-cost quick cast. It's 2 wind and 3 void. This card deals 1500 damage to target J/Resonator. This was mainly my card that I used to deal with really problematic cards. I used this to deal with Beelzebub, I used this to deal with Flipped Rhea, I think I also used this to try and deal with flipped flipped Fair, who didn't have any Gale counters left, I believe, if I remember correctly. So it is a pretty decent card. It's basically my big FU to the high cost Resonators or the J Rulers when they flip or whatever. So might bump this up to 2, but it seems to be doing pretty well as just a one-off right now, but I guess I'll need to wait and see. Obviously, since we're playing Wind, even though you don't really need to have Wind in order to play this card, 3 copies of Severing Winds, because that's the amount of copies that I have. I might run a playset if I ever manage to pull one, but because it's an SR from Echoes, it is extremely hard to pull. So I might not end up getting the 4th copy that I need for my playset, but it would be really cool to have it. Obviously, it's the 4 cost. It's the one where if your opponent played 2 or more spells, you pay nothing for it. It's totally broke. I hope it doesn't get banned because I really like it in my Wind deck, so it is really awesome. The other kind of one that I'm also running that we have for counters, because obviously green has to have counters of some kind, is Otherworld Dreams. And it's actually ended up being a really good card for me. It's obviously a 1-drop quick cast. You cancel target spell your opponent controls, then your opponent may play a card with total cost equal to or less than the total cost of the card cancelled this way from their hand without paying its cost. I might bump this up to 3 because I quite like this cancel spell. Other than this, we only have Severing Winds really, and I feel like this needs maybe a little bit more cancel just to kind of help it out a little bit, since we do go up against some kind of hard things or whatever in terms of like playing against things. Like I went up against a Lumia that had what was her name? It was the Light Six Sage. I can't even remember her name. The one with the spirits. I can't. Honestly, God, her name escapes me right now. Is it Almerius? Yeah, it's Almerius, that's it. I went up against that, and it was really annoying because it was Lumia Almerius, so they kept flickering her back in, getting the Will-O-Wisp back from the graveyard and whatnot that had died, gaining the life when they die, and drawing cards and everything like that. It was pretty annoying, so that's the reason why I maybe want to run more copies of that. Plus to deal with like the heavy big cards, whatever, or even like some of the little cards like Maiden Subjugation. That's an annoying card to have to deal with. Any other ones? Probably some really good Panda ones as well, like Rose Quartz stuff, because Panda's won at our locals. I think this is the 2nd time it's won it, or maybe the 3rd. I can't quite remember, but Panda's wrecked everybody, so I feel like this would be a good way to try and deal with that. So I might run another copy of this and make it a 3-drop for this. I'm also running 3 copies of Faith in the Darkness. I managed to trade for a full art, so I was pretty happy to get a full art of this one. This one is also another one. I managed to get a Jeanne off of this one time in the game, which was pretty awesome. What it does is you look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You may put a Resonator with total cost 2 or less from among them into your field. If you get Jeanne of Arc, Mad Maiden, into the field, this way you can put 2 100 counters on her, and it gets swiftness and first strike until end of turn, and then you put the rest of them back on the bottom of your deck in any order. I did manage to get Jeanne off of this once. The other times, I think I just got a little red or a spirit color elf. But even then, getting a little red into the field is also very nice. So that's why I'm running 3 of. I feel like running 4 would be a bit too much. But I'm not too sure. I'm still messing about with the numbers of this deck, obviously. But I feel like 3 is enough for this deck. For a little bit more firepower here, we have 3 copies of Windsor Vitality. It's pretty simple. It's a 1-cost quick cast. You give a target J/Resonator 600 until end of turn. I prefer this over Rapid Growth, mainly because it's a bit more. Sadly, it doesn't have Remnant, but at the same time, 600 for 1 is still pretty decent, so I would run this over Rapid Growth any day of the week. This is a card I think I'm going to cut from the deck. It's Wolfrain. It's a 2-cost, not 2-cost, it's a 3-cost. It's 1 dark and 2 void. You put 300 darkness beast / wolf resonator tokens with swiftness and precision into the field. At the next end of turn, you remove them from the game. I feel like I might drop this because I really didn't use this too much. I felt like I was mulliganing it more often than I was keeping it, and it didn't feel like it really synergized too well with the deck, so I think I might remove it and bump up the numbers of some of the other cards. It was okay to play with, but I mean, like, some of the times I did cast it when I get the wolves out, but most of the time I feel like it's not really doing too much for the deck. And last but not least, we have 2 additions here. We have 2 copies of the Elven Village, and we have 2 copies of Portal. You should really know what the Portal does, the Elven Village does by now, because I feel like I include it in almost every single Wind deck to try and counter Flyers, because Flyers are really annoying. It gives the Elves plus 200 defense. We can block Resonators with flying when they are attacking, and our opponent's J/Resonators with flying cannot attack our J/Resonators themselves. And then the other 2 that we have here is the Portal in the Woods, which is a 2-cost. When it enters, you put 5 guidance counters on it, and at the end of your turn, remove a guidance counter from it and put a 100/100 Wind Elf Resonator token into the field. So mainly this is for token generation. If we don't manage to Torn, essentially, and get all of our elf tokens off of Fiethsing, that's the main reason that we have this as well. I don't currently have a side deck for this because I'm still like debating about numbers and whatnot, guys, so I don't actually have a side deck. But if I reach over to the side of the camera and show the stone deck, it's actually all jumbled up here, so I forgot to fix this up. 2 seconds till I quickly fix this, because honestly, I thought I fixed this before I started the video. But here we go. We have 4 copies, Black Silence. We have basically 8 chances of getting Darkness in our deck. I did want to run Killing Stone, but at the same time I didn't, mainly because I don't like taking the 300 health and it coming in rested. So I feel like 8 sources of black is good enough. 9 times out of 10, we get the sources of black before we get the sources of green, or the mono sources of green. We also have 4 copies of the Gusting Darkness Magic Stone, one of the Vingolf 3 ones. And then other than that, we have the Saintly Elven Stone and a basic Magic Stone. Once, I'm maybe going to think about getting the Gil starter deck, mainly so I can get his stone, or maybe just trying to find the singles online, because I think I prefer his special magic stone over this one, because I think that's the one where you can tap and banish it and draw a card, so I might try and get that instead. But other than that, that's really it for the stone deck and whatnot. I might, I feel like I don't like the Killing Stone in decks that aren't Fox, so I might not put it in. I don't know, I'm debating it maybe as a one-off on the off chance that we can ramp it in with Little Red, but then I don't like getting it turn 1. I don't know, I'm thinking about it, guys. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this deck. Her Obedient Servants, I believe is what I was calling it. Mainly, I don't even know why I'm showing off Fiethsing, because she's not the MVP. The MVP is preferably Jeanne. She is the girl. She is the one leading this deck. I feel like this deck was built for her. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I've got the list down below if you want to look at it down below for exact numbers and whatnot, going over it. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below of this deck. Do you have a card you've pulled in Advent of the Demon King that you really want to build a deck for, whether it be one of the rulers or just one of the Resonators in particular that you really want to like build and a deck around? I'd love to hear all your ideas, guys. Until next time, I will see you all